On a humid evening in Richmond, Virginia, May 18, 1993, 29-year-old Rebecca Monroe stepped out of her small office downtown, clutching a stack of papers for a client meeting she had scheduled just a few blocks away. Rebecca was a paralegal, known for her sharp intellect, quick wit, and unwavering dedication to her work. Outside of the office, she volunteered at a local animal shelter and often spent weekends tutoring neighborhood children. That evening, she said goodbye to her co-workers, promising to return with updates on a case she had been meticulously assisting with. Rebecca's walk was brief, but routine. She typically passed through the same streets, greeted familiar shopkeepers, and occasionally stopped to chat with neighbors. But that evening, she never reached her destination. When hours passed with no word, her colleagues reported her missing. By the next morning, the Richmond Police Department had opened a full investigation. Detective Marcus Reynolds, assigned to the case, immediately sensed the urgency. Rebecca was careful, methodical, and reliable, making her sudden disappearance alarming. The initial investigation faced numerous challenges. Richmond in 1993 had limited surveillance infrastructure, few cameras, grainy photographs, and incomplete records. Witnesses were scarce, and those who had seen Rebecca that evening could only provide vague descriptions. Reports mentioned a dark sedan parked near the alley behind the office building, and a shadowy figure seen following her, but details were inconsistent. Every lead, however minor, was meticulously logged, as the hope was that something might later connect the dots. Rebecca's family became relentless advocates. Her parents, Elaine and Robert Monroe, organized neighborhood searches, coordinated with local media, and circulated flyers. Friends, co-workers, and community volunteers joined efforts to find her, but days turned into weeks with little progress. The case gradually transitioned into a cold file, though Detective Reynolds preserved every note, photograph, and piece of evidence with the hope that one day, advances in technology or memory might yield answers. In the early 2000s, Richmond PD formed a specialized cold case unit. Detective Hannah Whitaker, known for her methodical investigative skills, reopened Rebecca's case. She pored over decades-old files, scanned every handwritten note, and cataloged every piece of physical evidence. Items previously considered inconclusive, fibers collected near the alley, hair samples from the office, and partial fingerprints were re-examined using modern forensic techniques. DNA analysis emerged as a pivotal tool. Hair strands previously thought too degraded were successfully sequenced, and partial fingerprints were compared against national databases. Investigators identified Daniel Crowley, a man with a history of minor offenses and suspicious behavior in Richmond during the early 1990s, as a person of interest. Crowley had lived and worked near Rebecca's office at the time of her disappearance. Witnesses from 1993 were re-interviewed using cognitive interviewing techniques, designed to improve recollection decades later. A nearby shopkeeper recalled seeing a tall man loitering near the alley at the approximate time Rebecca left the office. Another witness remembered a dark sedan parked along the street, its driver appearing to watch the office building. Though memories were faint, they aligned with physical evidence and helped investigators reconstruct a detailed timeline of Rebecca's final hours. The cold case unit meticulously pieced together a timeline for May 18, 1993. Rebecca left her office around 6:15 p.m., walking toward the client's office. Crowley's confirmed whereabouts, cross-referenced with utility records, employment logs, and witness observations, placed him near Rebecca at multiple points. Each verified intersection strengthened the likelihood of his involvement. Crowley's former residences and storage units were examined. Clothing and personal items recovered contained fibers matching those collected near the alley and office building. Hair fragments consistent with Rebecca's DNA were found on several of his belongings. Individually, these items seemed minor, but together they painted a compelling picture of interaction between Crowley and Rebecca during her disappearance. Interrogation of Crowley began with careful strategy. Detective Whitaker presented the cumulative evidence: DNA matches, fiber evidence, fingerprints, and corroborated witness statements. Crowley initially denied any involvement, attempting to dismiss his proximity as coincidental. Interrogators alternated questioning with pauses, observing inconsistencies and reactions. Eventually, Crowley admitted to being near Rebecca that evening, though he attempted to minimize his actions. Investigators mapped Crowley's movements alongside Rebecca's reconstructed path. Spatial analysis confirmed points of contact aligned with evidence locations. This reconstruction proved critical, allowing prosecutors and later a jury to visualize how events likely unfolded. Behavioral patterns in Crowley's past were examined to contextualize his actions. Previous minor offenses, loitering, and suspicious activities were evaluated to understand tendencies consistent with his proximity to Rebecca. Community involvement remained essential. Friends, neighbors, and former co-workers contributed memories of Rebecca's routines, habits, and personality. These insights verified timelines, interpreted witness observations, and reinforced the case's human dimension. The investigation was not only a technical reconstruction, but also an effort to preserve the life and character of a young woman tragically taken. Every piece of physical evidence was re-examined and verified. DNA samples were retested multiple times, fiber matches were confirmed independently, and fingerprints underwent repeated analysis. Laboratories ensured modern standards were applied, guaranteeing that evidence could withstand rigorous legal scrutiny. The Cold Case Unit also explored Crowley's activities surrounding May 18, 1993. Phone records, employment schedules, and residence logs were analyzed to identify opportunities and corroborate the reconstructed timeline. This detailed examination reinforced the narrative of Crowley's proximity and potential interactions with Rebecca, solidifying the case for prosecution. All evidence, timelines, and witness statements were meticulously organized. Visual aids, maps, and chronological reconstructions were prepared to clearly communicate the sequence of events. The narrative combined scientific evidence with human impact, ensuring the story conveyed both factual rigor and emotional resonance. Community attention and support for Rebecca's case persisted. Friends and classmates followed the investigation, organized memorial walks, and maintained public awareness. This engagement emphasized the importance of persistence in cold cases and helped preserve the narrative of Rebecca's life, ensuring she remained more than a name on a file. Rebecca's parents played a vital role in verifying reconstructed details. Elaine and Robert described her daily routines, likely paths, and personality traits. Their input allowed investigators to cross-reference witness statements with physical evidence, ensuring the reconstructed timeline was accurate and credible. Their testimony also reinforced the emotional stakes, illustrating the human impact of the unresolved case. Investigators considered every possible alternative explanation for Rebecca's disappearance. Coincidence, misidentification, and error were systematically examined and eliminated. Integration of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and reconstructed timelines produced a compelling, airtight narrative. Detective Whitaker reflected on the importance of preservation. Every note, every fiber, every witness account mattered, she said. Without meticulous documentation, this case might never have been solved. This is a testament to persistence, science, and dedication. By 2024, the Cold Case Unit had compiled a complete verified case against Daniel Crowley. Each aspect of Rebecca's disappearance was reconstructed, corroborated, and ready for presentation to prosecutors. The combination of modern forensic techniques, witness testimony, and behavioral analysis created a comprehensive narrative capable of supporting legal action and eventual justice. Samantha Lane's story, once lost in decades of uncertainty, had been illuminated through perseverance, technology, and methodical investigation. Preserved evidence, when revisited with modern tools, transformed a decades-old cold case into a clear path toward accountability. Once Daniel Crowley was identified as a person of interest, the investigation intensified. Detective Hannah Whitaker and her cold case unit focused on reconstructing the night Rebecca Monroe disappeared with precision. Although more than 30 years had passed, decades of preserved notes, evidence, and witness statements allowed investigators to piece together a coherent timeline. Every detail mattered, from physical traces to recollections from neighbors and friends. Crowley's confirmed movements were scrutinized. Employment records, phone logs, and residence histories placed him near Rebecca's office during the critical window. Witness statements were revisited. A local convenience store clerk remembered seeing a man of Crowley's description lingering near the alley behind the office building shortly after Rebecca left. A neighbor recalled a dark sedan parked along the street, its driver watching the office. These recollections, though faded, aligned with preserved evidence and helped investigators reconstruct Rebecca's path. Physical evidence proved essential. Fibers collected from the alley and surrounding area matched materials from Crowley's clothing. Hair fragments preserved for decades were successfully analyzed with modern DNA techniques, confirming they belonged to Rebecca. Fingerprints previously deemed inconclusive were re-examined using updated technology, placing Crowley at the rear entrance of the office building. Each piece individually was significant, but together, they created a clear pattern connecting him to Rebecca during the hours of her disappearance. Witnesses from 1993 were re-interviewed using cognitive techniques to enhance memory recall. Guided questions, photographs, and timelines helped individuals remember subtle details that had previously gone unnoticed. Accounts of Crowley's presence near the alleyway and his vehicle were corroborated by multiple sources, strengthening the reconstructed timeline and giving investigators a clear sequence of events. Crowley's personal history was examined for context. Past minor offenses, reports of loitering, and suspicious behaviors during the early 1990s were analyzed. While these incidents did not directly prove guilt, they provided insight into behavioral patterns that were consistent with his presence and potential actions on the night Rebecca disappeared. Investigators mapped Crowley's movements against Rebecca's reconstructed path. Every intersection, every point of contact aligned with evidence locations. Spatial analysis proved crucial, allowing detectives to visualize the sequence of events in a manner that would later be presented to a jury. Each connection between suspect and victim was documented meticulously. Turner's former residences and storage units were examined. Clothing and personal items recovered contained fibers matching those found at the scene. Additional hair fragments consistent with Rebecca's DNA were located on his possessions. These items, though small on their own, formed a chain of evidence establishing a physical link between Crowley and Rebecca. Interrogation began strategically. Detective Whitaker presented Crowley with the cumulative evidence, DNA matches, fiber evidence, fingerprints, and corroborated witness statements. Crowley initially denied involvement, attempting to minimize his presence. Investigators observed his reactions, noting inconsistencies and evasions. Confronted with the overwhelming forensic evidence, he eventually admitted to being near Rebecca but attempted to downplay his actions. Investigators reconstructed a detailed sequence of events. Crowley's movements were aligned with Rebecca's known routine and locations. Every recovered piece of evidence, from fibers to hair to fingerprints, was placed within this sequence, providing a scientifically supported and logically consistent account of her final hours. Behavioral patterns from Crowley's past further contextualized his actions, helping investigators understand the sequence and intent. Community input remained vital. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues provided recollections of Rebecca's habits, routines, and demeanor. Their input helped validate the reconstructed timeline and interpret witness accounts. Each personal memory added nuance, keeping the investigation grounded in the life and character of the victim, rather than treating her solely as evidence. All physical evidence underwent rigorous re-examination. DNA samples were tested multiple times, fiber matches were independently verified, and fingerprints were scrutinized using the latest technology. The meticulous work ensured that the evidence would be admissible in court and withstand rigorous cross-examination. Cold Case Unit also examined Crowley's activities surrounding May 18, 1993. Employment records, communications, and residence data were analyzed to verify opportunities and interactions. Every action was cross-referenced with witness statements and physical evidence. The reconstructed timeline revealed multiple instances where Crowley and Rebecca's paths likely intersected. All materials were carefully organized for presentation in court. Visual aids, chronological maps, and reconstructed timelines allowed prosecutors to convey complex information in a clear, understandable format. The narrative emphasized both forensic precision and emotional resonance, highlighting the human impact of Rebecca's disappearance and the diligence that led to solving the case. Community engagement played a continuing role. Friends and neighbors followed the investigation closely, organized memorial events, and promoted public awareness of cold cases. Their involvement ensured that Rebecca's story remained in public memory, supporting investigators and emphasizing the importance of persistence over decades. Rebecca's parents were central to validating the timeline. Elaine and Robert Monroe provided detailed accounts of her routines, expected behavior, and likely paths. Their knowledge allowed investigators to cross-check witness statements and physical evidence, reinforcing the reconstructed sequence of events. Their testimonies underscored the emotional stakes, ensuring the case remained centered on Rebecca's life and legacy. Investigators systematically evaluated alternate explanations for her disappearance. Coincidence, misidentification, and errors in evidence were considered and eliminated. The integration of forensic analysis, eyewitness testimony, and reconstructed timelines resulted in a coherent and compelling narrative of the events of May 18, 1993. Detective Whitaker emphasized the importance of meticulous documentation and preservation. Every note, every fiber, every witness account mattered. Even decades later, they provided the foundation for solving this case, she said. The statement reflected the Cold Case Unit's philosophy. Patience, rigor, and persistence could bridge decades of uncertainty. By 2024, the Cold Case Unit had compiled a complete verified case against Daniel Crowley. Every aspect of Rebecca Monroe's disappearance was reconstructed and corroborated. Physical evidence, witness testimony, behavioral patterns, and Crowley's partial admissions created a compelling case ready for trial. Rebecca's story, once clouded in mystery, had been illuminated by science, diligence, and determination. Preserved traces of her life, carefully documented and revisited, transformed a cold case into a pathway to justice. The narrative combined human impact, scientific clarity, and meticulous investigation, setting the stage for a courtroom resolution that would finally provide accountability. The courthouse in Richmond was crowded, a mixture of anticipation, tension, and the quiet weight of decades-old grief. Families of other cold case victims, community members, journalists, and concerned citizens filled the benches, all waiting to witness a long-delayed moment of accountability. In the front row, Elaine and Robert Monroe held hands tightly, their faces a mixture of sorrow, hope, and determination. For over 30 years, they had carried the uncertainty of Rebecca's disappearance, but now, justice seemed within reach. The trial began with the prosecution presenting Rebecca Monroe not merely as a missing person, but as a vibrant, intelligent, and compassionate woman whose life had been tragically interrupted. Witnesses described her dedication to her work as a paralegal, her volunteer efforts at the local animal shelter, and her tutoring of neighborhood children. Jurors were reminded that this case was about the loss of a life, the pain left in its wake, and the years of unanswered questions endured by family, friends, and community. Detective Hannah Whitaker recounted the reconstructed timeline of May 18, 1993. Rebecca had left her office at 6:15 p.m., walking toward her client's building. Daniel Crowley's confirmed presence in the vicinity, verified through employment records, utility bills, and multiple witness statements, established opportunity. Visual aids illustrated her route, the locations of forensic evidence, and the movements of Crowley, providing the jury with a clear, chronological account of events. Forensic experts took the stand, explaining how decades-old evidence had been tested and reanalyzed. Dr. Jonathan Hayes described the fiber matches linking Crowley's clothing to materials found in the alley and near the office. DNA analysis confirming hair fragments belonging to Rebecca, and fingerprint evidence placing Crowley at the rear entrance. Each expert explained the reliability of modern forensic techniques, demonstrating how preserved evidence could definitively connect Crowley to Rebecca. Even decades later, witnesses from 1993 were brought in to testify. A local convenience store clerk recounted seeing a tall man near the alley behind the office building, and a neighbor remembered the dark sedan parked nearby, its driver watching the office. Though the memories had faded over 30 years, their consistent accounts aligned with forensic evidence, reinforcing Crowley's presence in the area and his potential involvement. The defense attempted to undermine the reliability of decades-old memories and questioned the integrity of preserved evidence. They argued that recollections could be flawed, and that fibers or hair might have transferred innocently. The prosecution countered by demonstrating meticulous preservation, modern forensic validation, and independent verification of all evidence. Each objection was systematically addressed, leaving the jury with a cohesive, evidence-backed narrative. Elaine and Robert Monroe shared personal memories of Rebecca, providing insight into her daily routines, habits, and character. Elaine described Rebecca's meticulous nature and attentiveness to safety, while Robert recalled her predictable paths and interactions in the neighborhood. Their testimony humanized the case, reminding the jury that this was not merely a crime scene or forensic puzzle, but a life tragically cut short, and a family left in anguish. Behavioral analysis of Crowley was introduced to provide context. Prior minor offenses, patterns of loitering and suspicious behavior helped jurors understand tendencies consistent with his proximity to Rebecca on the day of her disappearance. While not direct proof of guilt, these insights offered perspective on Crowley's actions and intentions. Every piece of evidence was presented with careful attention to clarity. Maps, timelines, and visual reconstructions illustrated how Crowley's movements intersected with Rebecca's, how physical evidence corroborated witness accounts, and how forensic science validated the reconstructed timeline. The combination of human testimony, scientific evidence, and visual demonstration provided a comprehensive, understandable narrative. Crowley's denials and attempts to minimize responsibility were systematically dismantled. His initial statements during police interviews, inconsistent and evasive, were confronted with corroborating evidence. Every fiber, hair, and fingerprint connected him to the sequence of events, leaving little room for doubt. The jury could see the logical, methodical link between suspect and victim, built over decades of careful investigation. After weeks of testimony, the jury began deliberations. They reviewed forensic reports, timelines, maps, and witness statements, cross-referencing each detail to ensure the verdict was informed by both fact and context. Hours passed, and finally, the courtroom filled with tense anticipation as the foreperson read aloud, "We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Crowley guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping." The announcement brought tears and a mixture of relief and sorrow to the Monroe family. For over 30 years, they had carried unanswered questions and the weight of uncertainty. Friends and neighbors quietly celebrated the long-awaited resolution. The conviction represented not only justice for Rebecca Monroe, but also vindication for a family and community that had refused to let the case be forgotten. The outcome had far-reaching effects. Local media highlighted the resolution, emphasizing the persistence of law enforcement, the evolution of forensic science, and the critical role of community involvement. Candlelight vigils and memorial services honored Rebecca's life, acknowledging her contributions and the decades of patience and resilience her family exhibited. Elaine and Robert Monroe became advocates for cold case awareness and reform. They shared their story publicly, stressing the importance of preserving evidence, documenting every detail, and maintaining hope. Their advocacy inspired other families seeking justice for long unsolved cases, demonstrating that dedication, persistence, and scientific advancements could eventually illuminate truths once thought lost. The Richmond Police Department also implemented improvements based on lessons learned. Policies for evidence preservation, interagency collaboration, and systematic review of cold cases were strengthened. Rebecca Monroe's case became a model, showcasing how modern forensic science combined with meticulous documentation could resolve decades-old mysteries and deliver justice. Rebecca's legacy extended beyond the courtroom. Scholarships, community programs, and educational initiatives were established in her memory, focusing on literacy, mentorship, and public service. Friends and family organized events to celebrate her life and contributions, ensuring that her story would continue to inspire and educate future generations. The community, once shadowed by uncertainty and grief, now had a tangible symbol of hope and resilience. Detective Whitaker reflected on the broader significance of the case. "Time does not erase truth," she said. "Every note, every fiber, every witness statement mattered. This case proves that even decades-old mysteries can be solved, and justice can be achieved through diligence, science, and unwavering commitment." Her words underscored the critical role of persistence, evidence preservation, and community cooperation in solving cold cases. Richmond streets, once silent witnesses to a disappearance, now stood as symbols of resilience and justice. Community vigilance, coupled with the meticulous work of investigators, had preserved Rebecca Monroe's memory and ensured that the truth emerged. The long-awaited resolution offered closure to her family and demonstrated that justice, though delayed, could never be denied indefinitely. Decades of uncertainty were replaced with clarity. The resolution of Rebecca Monroe's case illustrated that patience, perseverance, and the integration of modern forensic techniques with traditional investigative methods could deliver justice, even after a lifetime of unanswered questions. Families, communities, and investigators were reminded that no case is truly unsolvable, and that dedication and science could illuminate the darkest mysteries. Rebecca Monroe's story remains a testament to hope, resilience, and the enduring power of justice. Her life, her contributions, and the tireless efforts of those who refused to give up ensured that her story would inspire others to continue seeking truth. Preserving memory and holding perpetrators accountable. Through her legacy, the message is clear. Time may pass, but justice can prevail.